we have it, every time we have the book review, I really feel relaxed because it's a Friday, it's 3 p.m. and I'm heading home for the weekend. So I'm really grateful for it. And I'm grateful that we've come this far with the book club. And The Road to Character is written by David Brooks. And in order for you to understand the style of writing, it's because he's a columnist in the, I think it's New York Times, Primera? I think it's New York Times. Yeah, so he writes in that kind of style. So I'm just going to say 4 things that will guide us throughout the book. If you master only those 4 things, you master the book. In terms of character, so it's resume virtues, with a resume virtue. Claire is defined by her qualifications, by the job she does, by what she's doing right now, her company, the company she works for, the accomplishments she has, the degrees that she has. That is the virtue, resume virtues. These are things that I've accumulated by my education, by my skill, by my experience. And then eulogy, virtues. In the book, he defines it as the external success. And then the eulogy, virtue. Eulogy is the things they say at your funeral, the things they say at your funeral. So we are defined by those 2. You're either living by the resume virtues and they define you, or the eulogy virtues. So in this book, David tries to encourage us to think twice about the life that we're living, the legacy that we're leaving. I think we've attended a number of funerals where they just call upon you and they're like, Hazel, can you say something about the person? It's time for friends to speak. And you're struggling with words. You're struggling, to say stuff. How should I remember this person? And you find that most of the speeches end up sounding like, she was a hard worker, she met her targets, she showed up to work on time, and that is the legacy they have left. Now, while reading this book, I realized that I need to actually rethink my life. Do I want to live by my eulogy virtues? What will people say about Claire? What will people say about me in the eulogy? So it's like writing your own eulogy. If you can't write your own eulogy and you're struggling with your own words, then it's most likely you have been living with the resume virtues. So that is the gist of the book, The Road to Character. And then there are 2 Adams. According to the original, like the Genesis Adam, in this book, they refer to 2 Adams. Adam 1 talks about the selfish Adam, the side that is competitive, the side that is that thinks about me, what do I earn, what do I gain from this? So at the beginning of this, they say we leave a culture of Adam 1 neglecting Adam 2. And if you look at the description of Adam 1, I'm just looking through here. Adam 1 emphasizes external qualities. And then Adam 2 is internal. Adam 2 wants to embody moral qualities and inner, like an inner character, a quiet but solid sense a sense of right and wrong. So it's deeper. It's deeper. So when you look and evaluate your life, are you living with Adam 1 or are you living Adam 2? And then are you living with the eulogy virtues or are you living with the resume virtues? I don't know whether that makes sense, Primera, as an intro.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much for that. Then we can just go a little bit deeper. Like from my perspective, I found some things I had to deal with on a personal level. It was very, let's say, asking too many questions. I found myself asking myself too many questions about myself and how I show up to the world. I'm not sure if other people felt the same way. Please, you make use of the chat to be able to tell us how you felt about the book. And you can also raise your hand and just give us comments about the book and how you felt about it. For me as a person, it was a time of checking myself, asking myself the same questions the author is trying to ask in the book. We emphasizing too much of myself and then leaving the rest of the world out. Am I thinking too much about myself and me, and instead of actually absorbing my environment and actually giving flowers to other people? Yeah, I don't know how you thought about that and how you felt about it.
Yeah, and it's there's a quote, I think I actually shared it in the book club, that says, if you are only Adam 1, you turn into a shrewd animal, crafty, a self-preserving creature who adapts to playing the game and turns everything into a game. If that's all you have, you spend a lot of time cultivating professional skills, but you don't have a clear idea of the source of meaning in life. And I think in our pursuit of professional growth as leaders, in Girls for Girls, we really are trying to help leaders live meaningful lives while pursuing their careers. Now you find that many people are using the time of their youth to try and get that job, get into that company, arrive at this point, achieve so much, which is not wrong. But if that is all that you have, that's all that you think about every single day, that you have to climb over everyone else in order to get to where you want to be, you find that at the end of the day, you are very busy. You have devoted your entire life to this, and you end up missing the simple joys of life. And I would like to hear from Kathy. Kathy, are there any comments like to have an open discussion concerning this, whether you read the book or you're just picking up points as we speak? We are still on chapter 1, and we're talking about Adam 1 and Adam 2. What's your opinion about that? Kathy, are there any comments?
Yes, hi ladies in the chat room. Oh, I remember when Primera hinted that even if you've loved the cover, it's okay, you can join into a discussion. So yes, the ladies said yes, they really enjoyed the cover. Just the cover alone gave them food for thought. So it's that deep, this book that we are reviewing today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So just adding to what Claire had said, it's basically we are using, instead of using our integrity, commitment, and kindness to lead what we do, then we are saying I'm going to follow what my heart desires, no matter where I'm going. I'm going to accomplish whatever I want, no matter what. So for me, it's a catch-22. It's I want to accomplish everything I want to do, no matter what. But what kind of values are my guide? That's the question. Yeah. So he's talking about basically that the modern society, and he kind of goes back and talks about the 50th century and how we think it was so nice. Today, when people say, they say, I wish I lived in the 50s, in the 60s. It doesn't matter, but that age and that time also had its own problems, just like we have now. But it's about being able to understand right now in the year 2022, what is it about our society and the moral values that we can actually follow that will actually bring us real joy and satisfaction in our life. That was an interesting lesson for me. And so I've been scribbling a lot and I'm saying, where do I belong? Where do I belong? Where do I belong to each part of our life? And there was also another lesson that was quite interesting about being able to admit our flaws and toss away pride. There's an interesting book, Ego is the Enemy. I haven't finished reading it, but the cover for me has been everything. And actually bought the book because of the cover. I'm still reading the book. But how do we find our flaws and how do we throw out our pride and not let ego lead in some of the things we do? Over to you, Claire, your thoughts.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that before we go to chapter 1.
Okay.
As he was concluding, it says that as leaders, we need to have Adam 1 bowing down to Adam 2 if you are to succeed. You know, when you talk about, when in our corporate spaces, most people say female bosses are the worst to work for. You know, if you have a female supervisor, you are doomed. But the issue that is creating that is, as leaders, we have allowed Adam 2 to bow down to Adam 1. We have lost, I wouldn't say, I don't know, not a moral compass, but we have allowed the pressures of work to define our character. A commentary about this book, he was so it was actually David Brooks speaking. He was talking to university students and was giving a lecture about character and how you define character. Character, he says that character is defined by the people who see you. Yeah, the people who see you. You can say Claire is a kind person, but how do you define Claire's, what makes you say Claire is a kind person? You have to have evidence of character, and we shall see it with our different personalities that are mentioned in the rest of the book, because the book is based on testimonials and examples of people who have emulated character. So as leaders in the different spaces, whether in business, whether in corporate spaces, even in our homes, my husband should be able to say Claire has a nice character. As a wife, he needs to be able to define that and what that looks like. If your own husband in your own home cannot say that you have a good character, then you need to ask yourself why. Why does he say that I'm like this? If you have a team and the team members, not everyone, and this is not about liking, it's not about liking, but it's good to also get feedback. That's how we get better, because as human beings, we are flawed. We are born flawed. And so we are not perfect. But books like this help us to stop and rethink. Am I leading from a point of pride, or am I leading from a point of humility? And what does that look like as a leader? Will it come off as being weak, yeah, when I show compassion? Or will it really help me deliver and push my team to deliver. So for me, I was looking at, in my notes, it's really self-evaluation. Claire, who are you? Are you leading with eulogy virtues, or are you leading with the resume virtues? So that for me, that when I read that, it's a difficult book, but we chose this book for a purpose. And there are things that we wanted the ladies on the book club to pick out. And for me, reading chapter 1 helped me stop and rethink. And there's areas that I wrote down that I need to work on as Claire. And I hope through this review in the next few minutes, we'll be able to define what the key takeaways from this book are. Thank you, Primera.
Thank you so much, Claire. I feel the same, like it was so reflective in terms of trying to write what those things are that I, as a person, I need to work on. And I think even our conversations for the last week have changed. Like every time we're like, okay, I need to like think about that, think about something before I post it, think about what I am actually saying and putting on the wall. So there is a social media aspect where our lives look so glossy on the outside, but in real life, it's far from what it is. So in that case, especially when people are looking up to us, they are thinking, or Claire's life is this way, Primera's life is this way. But in real life, so where is that balance? Where is that perfect balance between what we're talking about? So in the last part of that chapter 1, it talks about Adam 2 not having a recipe book. So basically in this session, it's not that we're going to have a recipe book on how to build Adam 2. It's basically what are those lessons, what are those things that I'm going to take away and say, I'm going to try and work on them. No, like these are the things I'm struggling with. These are my flaws, and how do I make them work for me, and how do I try to work on them? So we can start on the next lesson. Claire, over to you.
All right, chapter 1, it has a title, The Shift, and it just takes us through how the cultures have changed from the past. One, he talks about, of course, a broadcast on a radio, command performance, and it was reviewing, it was after a war, and it was talking about who had survived war, heroes of war, and was talking about their response, their response to how they were being celebrated. And most of them talked in terms of groups. They talked in terms of this person did better than myself. We fought as a team, we won as a team. And in that entire chapter, it talks about the shift in how people consider success. Many of us want success. Everyone, even on this call, the reason as to why all these ladies have logged in is to, to learn, improve, and be successful in the different areas of their lives. So when he was listening to these heroes of World War, I think World War II, there was no self-celebration. People were actually talking about what other people had done. They're interviewing a hero, but the hero is referring to someone else. And it goes on and gives the example of the President Bush. President Bush, when he was still giving speeches, his mother used to edit the speeches. And every time there was I in the speech, if the speechwriter put I and replace it with we, like we, everywhere there was I, they could replace it with we. And even after he would leave the podium, and the mother would remind him that there you go again, talking about yourself. And with that, the mother had instilled a culture of don't talk about yourself, Yeah, let it be a team effort. And this is very, very rare. You find that many times we exalt ourselves, even as a team, we exalt ourselves. For example, the reality is, I don't choose the books. We have an entire team that discusses the books, that discusses what we are going to read. Someone else is doing the, like I do the artworks. Someone else is, Primera is always with the IT behind, making sure all of you have your emails. So it's team effort. Now, as a leader, we need to be able to recognize that kind of thing. And in this book, he talks about the shift from the team effort to the big me. And there he says, over the years, they've collected data that has shown that our culture has shifted from a culture of humility to a culture by what happens social media. With the growth of social media, with the growth of things like not so much about Instagram, portray, and what that does, me, the impression that I'm not doing enough, whether in my career or in my space. If my children are not looking as good as Primera's children, if their parties are not as glamorous as her parties, then there is an issue with how I'm doing it as a mother. And it creates that kind of emptiness. And in this book, it says that you need to be very careful about that kind of culture. You need to be very mindful about that shift. And I think Primera will discuss more about that. We are actually putting the same spirit into our children, where we are asking our children to follow this culture of self-promotion, of me. You need to be, even when you look at the report, you say, how come Patience is better than you? How come Patience is always first? Can't you be first? Can't you go ahead? Can't you, whether it's in a sport, whether it's in academic work, which is not bad, because we need to be able to excel in every area of our lives. But how do you excel, and how does that contribute to the character of the child that you're trying to mentor, for lack of a better word? So that particular chapter talks about why has this happened? Why is there a shift from the radio program of people celebrating everyone to self-celebration and the big me? Primera?
Thank you so much about that. There was something interesting in that chapter also about self-respect and the definition of it. And for me, it was basically about self-respect not being based on IQ, but being based on who we really are. So it says it's earned by being better than you used to be, and by being dependable in times of testing, straight in times of temptation, and it emerges in one who is morally dependable. That was interesting in terms of that chapter. All right, are you ready to go chapter 2?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
just wanted to
chapter-
mention something about a survey that was done. And it says in one survey, middle school girls were asked who they would like to have dinner with. Jennifer Lopez came first. Jesus Christ came second. Paris Hilton third. And the girls were then asked which of the following jobs they would like to have. Nearly twice as many say they would rather be a celebrity. A celebrity's personal assistant, for example, a personal assistant to Justin Bieber, than the Harvard, the president of Harvard. And and so I found that a very, very interesting study. Yes, it was done in the US, but I guess if you asked our children now, I'm sure they would also give you the same answers, because the generation that has shifted in the things they value as important. So it is our role as parents on this call, beyond our corporate spaces, to be able to guide our kids on how to build character. If your child's only dream is to meet Jennifer Lopez, if not even Jennifer Lopez, you can find some celebrity. And so this is the kind of content that our children
Just a second. We get Claire back on. Kathy, do we have any comments on the chat?
Yes, thank you, Primera. We have comments from Hazel. Hazel agreed with you that the introduction really, really intrigued her, and she had a lot of self-reflection just from the introduction. And then we have Carol. Carol said work should not define our characters. And then Susan says interesting concept. In our world, it's more I and rarely we. Okay, then Naniki is asking, isn't this I glorification what produces narcissism in the work environment, etc.? Yes, it is. I think he actually mentioned this. I just don't remember the page, but it talks about the root of narcissism. And it's really from that I glorification. Yes, Primera?
All right, that's really nice. So as we wait for Claire, we can go on to chapter 2. So chapter 2 is a very interesting topic, chapter. It starts with a story about, welcome back, Claire. Yes, she's still on just a second. So welcome back, Claire.
dropped off.
Oh, hi, Claire. Yeah, welcome back. Now we can hear you.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So I think we can go to chapter 2.
Right. Okay.
Is
I was
that
trying
okay?
to read this chapter 2. Yes. So chapter 2, like Claire said, the book is really about
Okay.
stories. And chapter 2 is a very interesting chapter. It starts with a story about a group of ladies who are having tea on a nice March 25th. On March 25th, 1911. Yeah, they're nice ladies outside having tea, and then someone comes and says there's a fire. So they watch a fire from the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, which was one of the worst fires that we've seen in American history. It killed 146 employees because someone was negligent and threw a cigarette butt into some fiber that was lying around, and it started a fire. So the building was 10 floors, and the fire started on the 8th floor, but the manager and bosses took so long to be able to tell people on the other floors, on the 9th and 10th floor, about the fire. And then because they wanted to check people in the morning when they came, they had kind of made the exits and entries very narrow. So many people died. They threw themselves off the off the balconies to the bottom. They died. Even as much as the police and the fire brigade came, they weren't able. So many people died. So these ladies were having tea, and one of the ladies, her name is Frances Parkin. She's one of those ladies from a middle class family. Then, so she's coming from money, and then how she gives up her life to be able to fight for the rights of factory workers, of the less privileged. So that's the thing about the story. So it's really about the Sanborn self, and about, and the main theme around it is about humility. Yeah. Over to you, Claire. You're learning.
Yeah. Chapter 2 was a horrific story, a horrific story of people, of women who were caught up in a burning factory, a burning building. And many of them, the author goes into detail of the conversations of their attempt to survive, and how they had no space and no escape route to like jump out of these buildings. And these ladies who were just having, I think, an afternoon tea as friends, same at least for one, Frances Perkins, she did not stay the same. But in the chapters ahead, they talk about why this happened. It happened because people did not play. A lot had been said about the exit routes, the safety guidelines, and these had been ignored and ended up killing so many people. And it shows us, it's really a replica of our culture today. As leaders, we are put in positions to be able to make decisions. Now, the leaders of that time, maybe for the sake of profit, they did not mind about the safety regulations. And this happens every single day in our offices, in the decisions that we have to make. Some of the decisions we are making now are going to affect our children down the road. I remember I was listening to who is this child activist, about environmental child activists, the young one. I think she's now 17 or 16. I don't remember the name. Starts with a G. Kathy, with a scientist here. What's her name? Greta? What's her name? That climate change activist. Yeah.
Her name is Greta.
Thank you. Greta. Yeah, Greta. Greta talks about the reason as to why she's not in school. And she says, I cannot sit in class if what you're teaching me is not helping me to secure the world tomorrow, you know? And so today we look at our environment, we look at the decisions that we are making over the polythene, over, cutting down trees, and we say nothing. Yet we are in positions to make a difference, to make individual changes in our lifestyle in order to protect future generations. And so by keeping quiet, by not saying something when you have the platform to say something, we allow this to happen. And we're just like the people, we are at the same level as a person who lit the cigarette and burnt that entire building. So for me, when I was reading this, yesterday I was revising the notes for this review, and I was thinking about, it was a press day. This week was press day. And as journalists were talking about the challenges that they face in their workplaces, some of them have a voice they have a following, they're influencers. The content that they put out that we read every day, that on our social media, in our newspapers, on TV, they have an opportunity to influence decisions. If you are an MP, for example, you have an opportunity to raise your hand in Parliament and change a decision that can affect future generations. So at the end of this, see, someone's self, how do the things that happen around you summon you as an individual? And I think it's page 29, it gives an example of Viktor Frankl, his book, Man's Search for Meaning. Yeah, Man's Search for Meaning. And I don't know whether in the chat you can, by show of hands, if you've read that book. I think it's one of the most amazing books that is written by someone who actually went through who was captured and went through the torture camps, the Nazi camps, the concentration camps, and watched his mother, his wife, and brother killed in the camp. And through his experience, he's able to write that book and say the things that he went through are the things that transformed his character. So many times we want a rosy life, but it's through the fire that your character is defined. It is sometimes, many times it's through the challenges that you go through. For example, after a loss of a job, loss of a loved one, it never leaves you the same. It never leaves you the same. And so in this book, it talks about Frankl spent most of his time in a camp laying tracks for railway lines. This was not the life he had planned for himself. Yeah, this was not his passion or his dream. This is not what he would be doing if he was marching to the beat of his own drum. But the events, he woke up one day and he was in a concentration camp after having lost all his loved ones. But through the challenges that he went through, he realized the meaning of life. And I'm really, really thankful that I have not gone through such horrific experiences, but I'm privileged to have the opportunities that I have today. How then can I define the meaning of life? And that's why I love the book club. The book club helps us think deeper. These things are not taught at the university. They're not taught anywhere, but we can only find them in books. And so I employ everyone on this call to go out and read that book, Man's Search for Meaning. I think it really, really brings out what the author is trying to bring out in this book. Thanks, Primera. Maybe you can go to the chat.
Thank you. I just want to comment on something, then we go to the chat. Something about packing, and in the book, in that chapter 2, it's about how she did not choose her own life. Like, she came from a privileged background, but she chose to go out and fight for American workers' rights. And she was actually the first woman to serve in the presidential cabinet ever, in the Franklin D. Roosevelt time when he was president. And then we talk about her embracing a calling, and doesn't take, as in it involved her embracing a calling which does not take a route to direct fulfillment. That's on page 46. She was willing to surrender the things that are most dear by seeking to forget herself and submerge herself. She finds a purpose that defines and fulfills herself. Most vocations almost always involve tasks that transcend a lifetime. They almost always involve throwing yourself into a historical process. They involve compensating from the brevity of life by finding membership in a historic commitment. So sometimes it's not always obvious. Sometimes we find ourselves in something and you're like, okay, I may not know where it's going to go, what we say, navigating point to point, but you say, okay, let me throw myself in here. I may not know where it may take me eventually, but I'm just responding to a call. Thank you so much. Over to you, Kathy. Do you have any comments?
Wow, I get lost every time I hear anything from the book. It's just so reflective, especially that part, the parking story. It's really amazing, but it's also true that a vocation is not a career. It's something many times you do not apply a job, you apply your resume, you do not go out there shouting about it. You know, it's not about being Justin Bieber's PA or a very big bank account. You find that the stories where lives were transformed by one individual, that was a vocation. You look at Mother Teresa, you look at this Parkins lady, and it moves in such a way that you now go before people you did not think you would go before, because it's something out of selflessness. And so it fits rightly in the book, in the Road to Character, where it's no longer about I, but about we. I think anything to do with we, from history until the present day, really has a much bigger impact than something to do with I. And the Road to Character is such a profound reminder of that. And we have comments in the chat. Oh yes, Naniki is definitely going to add Man's Search for Meaning onto her reading list. Yes, yeah, and for me, my comment is really on that part of a person does not choose a vocation. A vocation is a calling. There's that thing that usually moves us into action, regardless of pay, regardless of what your friends will think, but something that's going to help humanity. That's usually transcends beyond our resumes, and most times brings us before leaders, before into spaces we did not think we would even be in, just like Parkins went on to serve in the USA government. Over to you, Primera.
All right, thank you so much. Any more comments from you, Claire?
No, we can move on. I just want to hear another voice from the ladies on call. Maybe they can just unmute and say something. Yeah. Hi, Carol. I can see Carol. Nice to see you here today.
Hi, Claire. I'm glad to be here after a long time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, Fortunate. I know Fortunate loves reading. Fortunate says something, so we can move on to chapter 3. Or any other person?
Hi, Claire.
It doesn't have to be about the book. It doesn't have to be about the book, like generally the topic.
You are not your work.
All right, no problem. All right, so I'm going to go to chapter 3.
Maybe I can say something. Sorry, Primera and Claire and Kathy. I've not read the book, but honestly, I'm just so hooked up. Starting from Claire, the way she talks about the cover, the insights, and also Primera coming in. And for me, honestly, this is awesome. And I wish all Girls for Girls could just join the book club, honestly. This is very, very awesome. Thank you, ladies.
All right, thank you so much. All right, thank you. I'll go to chapter 3. Chapter 3's title is Self-Conquest. So the story starts about a lady called Ida Stover. I'm not going to share her last name until the end. Ida Stover was born in 1862 in Virginia. She was one of 11 children, and so many things, bad things happened to her literally. She lost her mom at the age of 5. She lost her dad at the age of 11. She had the army coming to look for her 2 teenage brothers. Then after both her parents died, they were sent into live in different homes, all the children. So she goes into a home where she has to cook for a very large family. So she learns to do everything, patchwork, baking, everything, and all that stuff. So all she wanted to do was learn, study, but she couldn't have the chance because at that time, only boys were supposed to study to a certain degree. For her being a girl, she was at a disadvantage. She taught herself how to read 1,365 Bible verses in 6 months herself. Then after that, she was so committed to teaching herself and to learning, okay, basically taking care of Adam 1 and Adam 2. And then one time, her family goes on an outing, she sneaks out and leaves. She takes herself to a place, she gets a hotel and starts and enrolls herself into high school. She begins to learn. She comes across an inheritance, she puts it all into school, into what she's doing, and she studied music. According to her teachers, she wasn't the brightest student in school, but she was so hardworking. She would put all her energy in there. And at the end of it, they choose her to be a valedictorian in all that. Then later, she meets her husband, David, and with David, he was a complete opposite of her, but they get married. She begins to create a family. She was very spiritual, church, the word of God, her children, and things like that. So she had a lot of self-restraint, which is one of those things that comes out in the story, being able to let herself deny herself all these things to be able to go back to school even at a later age, and her religious conviction. And then she gets married to David. They have 5 children, and she raises them up with all the virtues and values that she had learned. Guess what? One of the sons became the 34th president of the United States, Dwight Eisenhower. That's the beautiful story of chapter 3. So over to you, Claire.
All right. Thank you. It's actually the detail that David uses in this book that is amazing, because he goes all the way to the background and shows you the circumstances that someone goes through do not have to define your future. If you can look at the story and what the lady had to go through, and her perseverance and her desire to be better, her desire to get an education, she was able to take herself out of a situation. And I think we read it in one of the books last year, where most of us grow up blaming our past, blaming our parents, blaming, you get to this point and you're blaming your parents why they didn't take you to good schools, why you studied in the village, why you were not born into a wealthy family. And that defines who you are, and you use that as an excuse for the things that you go through. The issue with this book is that, unlike a book like Switch, that is based on research, this one is based on life experiences. It shares experiences of people just like you and I, and how one person can change an entire generation. So when she was struggling and cooking for this family and going through all these hurdles, she did not know that one of her boys would actually be president one day. And so what I thought about in that moment is, like, as a mother, how am I actually nurturing these children? Am I bringing depression home? Am I bringing stress home? Am I bringing the anxiety? Am I an absentee mother? Just like when you relate it to the eulogy part, how am I faring in relation to the story that we've just listened to? I need to be able to think beyond, think about myself as a steward that has been given a privilege to be here now, to take care of my family now. And we shall later see the issue of seeing the issue of mentorship and how it plays in one's life. And so from that story, my key takeaway was your past does not define you. Yeah, it does not define you. If you are a single mother, that should not be your label, you know. I know people who are signing up for Single Mothers Club, and they go there and vent, and you know, that kind of group is going to keep you stuck. And so if you got pregnant as a teenager, or if you, those things, or you've been divorced before, these things do not define you. They do not define you. You can use that pain to actually propel you to greatness. And so it's very, very important for us to overcome, to overcome the mindsets, the things that are holding us back. Sometimes we can't go into new relationships because we bring the baggage of old heartbreaks, old relationships, old disappointments into new relationships, and it stops us from growing and from living our best life. So for me, reading her testimony, I was like, wow, can you imagine? She had to push and go through escape in order for her to attain all this. So that was my key takeaway. I see a number of comments in the chat. Kathy, maybe you can help us go through those.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Claire. There are actually not so many of the current comments, but I remember growing up, I loved Dwight Eisenhower quote of, I belong to a family of boys who are raised in meager circumstances in central Kansas, and every one of us earned our way as we went along. It never occurred to us that we were poor, but we were. Just imagine that. Instead of blaming the neighbors, your grandparents, the government, you know, the circumstances do change. And each one of us can actually be happy and strive forward in spite of the circumstances. I remember that we had a guest speaker in STEM who posed that question. Everyone was like, COVID has damaged this, the world will never recover. And I don't remember who it was, but she said that how is it possible that Safe Border found an opportunity in the pandemic? How is it possible? You know, she kept on giving all those examples and everyone got excited. And, you know, there's always opportunity in the circumstances that we're in. There's always an opportunity. And so no more blame games. We can actually be better. We can actually move forward in spite of the circumstances. Thank you, Claire.
All right, thank you so much. I have an interesting part about the book. My view about that chapter, because it goes deep into, it goes deeper into her life, into Ida's life. It goes a bit deeper into David's life and also the son's life. So it talks a lot about how her influence on her son's life, because at the time there was a lot of the world in which they lived, church at that time was too conservative. And for her, she introduced a lot of playfulness at home, even as she was raising the boys. So she was playful, warm, a lot of laughter in the home. And you see her influence on her son's life, even as he tries to take on to go to West Point to embark on a military career, how she was able to support him. At some point in the church, her and her friend, they were supposed to wear a bonnet to church. And her and her friend refused to wear the bonnets. They say, as we're not going to. So they shunned them and told them, we're not going to even sit at the front, you're going to sit at the back. But in the end, they were reintegrated back to church. No, and they were allowed even without borders. That ability to be able to change even the community from being too strict to a bit more playful. I thought that was quite interesting about her. But I'd like us to like go back and read that chapter. It's really interesting in terms of her story. Claire, are you ready to go to chapter 4?
Okay. Chapter 4 is about. It also talks about, the title of chapter 4 is Struggle, and it talks about Dorothy Day and her life and her family, how she was okay. Start when she was growing up. She was one who was very pious, very prayerful in her family, and in one of those nights when she was praying, she was very good at journaling. So this entire story is written in her, it's like as extracts from her journals. And while on one of those nights when she was praying, while like there was an earthquake, and while they were going through that earthquake, after the earthquake, when the earth had settled down, the house was a mess, everything was broken and everything was ruined. And she talks about that moment, that as in just one moment, her life was disfigured in one moment. Her whole life is disfigured in that one episode. And the story goes on talking about the many things that she went through, how her father like was working in a factory. The factory was burnt down in that earthquake. So their life was changed in just one night. And so when they moved to Chicago, it was a new environment. It was a new environment. They had, in just one night, they went into poverty. And for me, when I was reading this, it showed me something like COVID-19, which was very, very unique to our generation, and actually this book club was formed in COVID-19, in lockdown. And you find that many people went through the pandemic and it left them the same. Others, it transformed them totally as human beings, as employees, as leaders. And you find, like Kathy said, people saw opportunities in lockdown. Businesses that were struggling, this famous hand wash sanitizer, I've forgotten the name, but you can imagine that kind of business where you only provide sanitizer to hospitals. And out of lockdown, now the whole world needs your sanitizer. I can't even imagine how their numbers look like, how their graphs. I work in sales, so I can't imagine how their graph looks like in terms of sales, from selling to hospitals, one bottle a day to a clinic, to actually selling to every human being, every family, in just one second. And it goes to show the kind of things that we go through. If COVID-19 left you just as you were, having the same challenges, having the same mindset, then there is a problem. You need to be able to reflect, because it may be a loss of a job. It could be a loss of a loved one that has changed your mindset. it could be loss of a house, loss of a business, because many people went through. I have a forum where we just shared how COVID-19 affected us, and there were testimonies, and there was also stories of loss. But there was an interesting story of a friend of mine who lost her husband, and she had a YouTube channel, and she had 12 followers or something like that. But after a loss, she moved to Canada, and now, because she shares about loss and that the world needs her story, her YouTube channel has grown, and so she was sharing from that point of view. And we need to be sorry. I have a lot of noise here. Maybe Primera, you can pick up while I organize the background.
All right. Thank you so much, Claire. My takeaway from that chapter were really okay. First, do we have anything in the chat? If I give my takeaways for chapter 4.
No, I just put a comment from Dorothy Day.
All right.
It's something I think something that used to be shared in school, because I was in a Catholic school. So we had a nun who used to talk about Dorothy Day, and I didn't, that's after so many years. The next time I heard of Dorothy Day was in The Road to Character. For so many years, I'd even forgotten about the name. But then the moment I looked at the name, I remembered Sister Cosma. She used to say that, "Dear God, please enlarge our hearts to love each other." That's one of Dorothy Day's famous quotes. Yeah, thank you, Prim.
Right. So her journey is very interesting in terms of her coming from a home where there is really no religious background, or she's the only one who used to like pray. Even that day when the earthquake happened, her parents leave her like she's the only one who is going to survive. Physically, she can sort herself out. So she goes on through life trying everything out, trying out politics, trying out different things. And like Frances Perkins, she was not made out for all that. So she keeps looking out. She keeps looking out for what she could actually do, and she kept saying, "I think like." She felt pulled so much towards her spiritual life, and then when she looked around, she'd find that the Catholics around her were organizing people, organizing homes. This is after the 1918 Spanish flu. People were dying, things like that. So for her, she just wanted a lot of organization in her life. She had also gone through a lot in her life. She had had a lot of personal losses from family. She had had a lot of personal losses from relationships in her life that hadn't gone well. She had been left with a daughter, Tamar, and for her, she was really looking for organization in her life. So that's how she ends up joining the Catholic Church and gets converted, because she didn't have a particular faith but she just knew like, she's searching for God. So that's how she joins the Catholic Church. She becomes converted in the Catholic Church, and then because of her political activism background, she ends up writing a newspaper called The Catholic Worker, which became, okay, in addition to that, she also had boarding houses and communes with Catholic workers where she would offer help, aid, shelter, and connection to those that are in need. So basically, for me, my biggest lesson from this chapter is being able to recover. Sometimes when we have gone through a lot of suffering, we may think we are on a recovery journey, but sometimes we come out different. Let's say like what has happened to us through the last 2 years of COVID, like we may say, okay, let me try to recover my business, let me try to recover my home, my life, what my life's worth. But the truth is we are different. Like we've come out different at the end of 2 years. Like the experience we've had has changed us. Some of us go through different things in our life that we've gone through different things in terms of maybe laws, suffering and things like that, but we can't say that we are the same people. We may go through them, we may say, okay, I feel better about them, but not necessarily that we are never going to be left the same. So Day's lifelong yearning for God functioned as a form of suffering, which only found resolution when she aligned herself with something, her vocation, something that she would actually do. And one of those things was being part of the Catholic faith that helped her into converting her and giving her what she was actually looking for. After trying out so many things, that's my learning. I want lessons from people and say, okay, maybe if you're willing to share and say, maybe from my perspective, this is what like struggling has changed changed me in terms of my perspective of life and how I'm spending my time, my vocation, things that I like to do, things like that. It not necessarily have to come from the book, just from your own experience, because we're just pulling out the stories to be able to use them in our real lives. How do they apply? You can unmute yourself and share.
Hi,
Hi,
Prim.
ladies.
Oh, yes.
Hi.
Yes, Celia.
Like someone else mentioned, I hadn't read the book either, but I've been on this journey of diving deep into self-discovery and self-awareness. And I'm struggling with quite a few of the themes that are running through the book. So definitely I'm going to look it up, but more importantly, it's really helping me to reflect deeper and also appreciate some of the tweaks that I have to make in myself, but also in my attitudes towards others. So thank you so much for this.
All right. Thank you so much. Other comments?
Yes, Prim. I think for me, that part of the book reminds me of the fact that instead of beating ourselves up from the flaws in our characters, from our past mistakes, we can actually just find purpose and meaning in life. It's more of, it's something I should say, like finding some sort of salvation instead of beating ourselves up about our past mistakes and, you know, the different flaws that we're fighting with. I think if you take that moment to think and to just reflect, you can actually find meaning and purpose, just like Dorothy Day found after trying this and that and, you know, learning from her mistakes. I'm sure it wasn't easy, but she found salvation and later on devoted herself to a cause, and that gave meaning and purpose to her life.
All right. Thank you for that. Any other comments? This the topic for this was about struggle and being able to go through it and find meaning in life and find that that one thing that I can actually latch on to change the world. What is it that you've gone through in your personal life and like, okay, I've gone through this and it has changed the way I feel like. All right. Claire? Claire is ready.
Yeah. All right. We're going to chapter 5. Chapter 5.
You can give us your final comments on chapter 4 if you have any.
Okay, chapter 4, I just want to read the bit about, I think it was it's about, just hold on, please. It's a quote. Okay, now I've jumbled up my scrolling. Let me just continue to chapter 5. Maybe I'll
Yeah, sure.
get back. I didn't highlight it. Yeah, so chapter 5 is about self-mastery. And it's, I'm just going to give you a summary of the key character, and that is George Marshall. George Marshall was born in 1880 and in Pennsylvania. And his father was a very, very successful businessman. He owned a coal company. And so Marshall grew up like in a privileged kind of setting. He grew up with a silver spoon, but in his midlife though, his father sold a coal company and he invested in real estate and in Virginia, which became bankrupt, and he lost all his money. And so when he lost all his wealth, here he says that he lost all the wealth. It had taken him 20 years to acquire. And so he went into depression. He retreated from the world. And this greatly affected George Marshall, because it's about the dad that affected George Marshall, because it was very humiliating for him, for a boy who come from a wealthy family to suddenly become bankrupt and poor. And he later wrote that it was painful and very humiliating for him, and it was a black spot in his boyhood. So from having going to a good school, he had to go to public school. Marshall was not a bright boy. He was not very, like, in terms of academics, he was not doing so well. And so he was taken into, he had to go through all that in school, and he was taken to a school where he was terribly bullied. And one of the examples of the bullying and all that was, it's also recorded in here, where he was supposed to do an exercise and he ended up, I think, squatting while naked, and he couldn't hold it anymore, ended up falling on his side and getting a wound on his rear side. So they give details of the hardships that he had to go through. And anyway, just to cut the long story short, they talk about his sickness. He was, while in the VMI, he was attacked by typhoid fever. He was, they talk about the drills, the hassles of being part of, he joined the army, and he went through so much hardship that eventually helped him, like, okay, not helped him, but defined his later character. And so later we get to see him in the highest ranks in the American army. We talk about how he was able to rise to almost the highest level in the military, and the decisions that he made when discussing with, I think it was Franklin Roosevelt, 1938, and how he was instrumental in the decisions at that time. But for me, what I learned from the stories that they shared about Marshall and the hardships that he had to go through while in training, while in the army, and how he ended up in the highest office without academic excellence. I think in the book, what David is trying to bring out is that some of the things that we go through determine the future. It's not our academics, It's not our abilities, our inborn abilities that can define us. And sometimes we look at our children. I remember there was a discussion with a new curriculum, and they were saying that, why are you changing the curriculum? Our children are struggling with the curriculum. And I was actually sharing with Kathy, and I was saying that I received my son's report. He's in senior 2, and I had no clue, because for me, I was looking for marks, I was looking for position. So I was asking him, what's your position in the class? As in, where are the marks? And he told me the new curriculum is not assessing performance like that. It's not about position, it's not about, and so I had to sit down and actually read the teacher's comments on each of the subjects. Yeah, this is how he relates to the team. He's a good team player. He has done all of his assignments. And I after seeing the report, I actually realized I appreciated why the government took that step from being cramming and academic driven to a child understanding what they're doing. And so when you look at Marshall's story, it is not the fact that he had an academic problem that helped him. It's what he went through that defined his later character. And so from this chapter, what I learned is that we need to be able to look at the things that we go through, the experiences we go through, and how they can help us change, and the lessons that we can learn. When you look at most of the people in this book, you find that most of them kept journals, war journals. They kept writing their experiences, and that's where films are made, and that's where people read their notes and are able to write other notes. Some of the quotes, the well-known quotes that from Roosevelt, from George Washington, whatever, all the quotes that we read about were written by them in their own journals. And so what I learned is that I need to be able to write down and find out, yes, today I had a bad incident with a boss. What have I learned? And how can I be better? Or in this situation, how can I grow? Yeah, even if it's a tough situation, how can I be better? How did it make me feel? And how can I change through the experiences that I go through? Primera, I don't know whether that makes sense. I
Yeah,
feel
it
like
does.
it makes sense in
does.
my head. Yeah.
It does. I think
All right.
my biggest lessons from this chapter from him were how he there's a part of the book, I think page 106, where his brother is convincing his mother not to let him go to military school. For him, he wanted to go to military school because he wanted to be like his brother. His brother is like, no, you can't let him go to military school because he's going to embarrass the family name. Yes, he had been an unruly child, unruly. But overhearing that story gave him so much energy in life to turn around his life. So it's about, so he says that particular, in his words, is that the urgency to succeed came from hearing that conversation. It had a psychological effect on his career. So his mother really celebrated him. His mother really supported him. She sold her last plot of land to get him to go away to college, though his father was always constantly disappointed in him. So he really works hard, and he's one of those people who in World War II was indispensable to the president of the United States at that time, because he was really good with the logistics. He helped formulate and enact the European recovery plan. You can imagine how much he was vital later on. So for me, it was about letting ourselves, okay, at some point we may not have self-mastery, but being able to make that decision, like, okay, this has happened. How do I do a 360 turnaround and say that from honors I'm going to be self-disciplined, I'm going to learn all these things. Okay, it's a journey, really. It's not like a one-time thing. I can imagine for him, even in military school, it wasn't like a one-time thing to be able to learn and turn himself around. But eventually he did, and he was able to get his life together. He was able to be on the winning side and be very indispensable. You know, imagine by the time the president actually knows you exist, imagine coming from a boy who is unruly, having to rise to the ranks to that point is quite something. It's not something you can actually overlook. So is there any comments, Kathy, on the chat?
Yes, we have comments from Faith. Faith says Marshall's story teaches us to believe that in every challenge is a lesson to make you better and the best version of yourself. Kodra says that Marshall's story tells us that in every situation, there is always something good for us. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you very
For
much,
me, I
Prima and
enjoyed
Claire.
the stories. I enjoyed the stories because for like sometimes you can say because maybe you're reading American books, and there's sometimes you can read a book where there is no correlation in terms of the stories and what we actually experience in real life. I, for one, I'm a mother of a 10-year-old son, and trust me, when I read this story, I'm like, okay, I really understand how we as moms can go through a lot. Like when you're raising like a son, like anyone can say like sons are not very easy, especially around that age. They have what they want, you have what you want. Sometimes you can think they are not listening, and they're actually doing their own stuff. And then I'm like, okay. So when you read a story like this, and I'm like, okay, I can actually identify with her in the story. I can actually identify. I've also had one brother in my life, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, let's see, like I can actually identify my mom in the story and me growing up with my one and only brother. So it was quite interesting reading stories where you can actually identify. Kathy, I see one more comment in the chat.
Yes, there's a comment from Susan. And she's saying that sometimes you think failure in academics earlier in life is doom, but later in life it can change when someone finds their purpose. Oh, isn't that so true? Sometimes my friends and I look back at, when we see people achieving so much, and we're like, but that guy used to be so notorious in primary school. And they have completely changed, and they are global leaders. They are, scientists making such, impact. And it's just amazing. So that is very true. Then Naniki says on vocation, she's reminded of the concept of Ichigai, living a life of purpose aligned to what you're passionate about. The dream God has laid in your heart, that imprint on your fingers, that you can create a unique craft to give this world. Serve the work with that, I think she meant serve the world with that gift. Then we have Cecilia. She says a friend was offered a great job after interview, but she suddenly felt anxious that something might go wrong. We talked it over and reminded ourselves that the richest growth comes from adversity. Right. Thank you very much, ladies. Please keep the comments coming. This book is really, it's something else. It's something else. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire?
All right.
You're ready to go chapter 6?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. Chapter 6 is about dignity, and it's centered on one character. That is Philip Randles. Now, Philip was one of the, if you remember in our, I think it's chapter 1, there was the book starts with a radio program, Command Performance, and he was one of the leaders, the civil rights leaders who was on that show. And so this chapter centers around him, his life, but it gives a background. It gives a background of who he was, the kind of family he grew up in, and how it explains his later character. So Randolph was born to a father who was a minister, and but they were not well off. So because the church paid so little that he made most of his income as a tailor and a butler, while his wife worked as a seamstress. So Randolph was not a religious person, but in his family, they talked about, they had, I don't know, most of the Black Americans have it, that pride, you know, pride that overlooks the poverty that you live in. And so the family, I think the fourth chapter talks about the family lived lives of highly respectable poverty. The home was kept impeccably neat. They followed a code of old-fashioned propriety, discipline, and etiquette. They did not see themselves, these are the Black American, it's a Black American family. They did not see themselves as people who lived in poverty. Their house was kept neat. They taught their son how to speak. They taught him how to live, how to pronounce well. So as he grew up, people could not identify his accent with the poorer side of Mississippi or the Black Americans. And because the parents had taught him how to speak, how to behave, how to eat, they had created a rich mindset in his mind, in spite of their situation at home at that time. And so that chapter talks about how he goes into civil rights and how he, even when he was not privileged, he was able to sit and walk and talk like he had, like he was a leader from the young age. And one of the people who are speaking about him said, Randolph learned to sit erect and walk erect. You almost never saw him leaning back, reclining. No matter how enjoyable the occasion, you look around and there is Randolph just as straight as if there was a board in his back. So he was trained to be a leader, trained to stand up and all that. So later it talks about how this background helped nurture a person who, nurture a leader who was looking out for his, that time they were called the Negroes, and their rights. And he was very pivotal in actually in fighting for their rights. And later, when he met the president, I think it was Roosevelt, I'm not sure, let me see, Roosevelt, in one of his speeches, he was organizing a giant march, and the president called him to the White House, and he asked him, hello, Phil, the president said when they were together, which class were you in Harvard? And he said, I never went to Harvard, Mr. President. Randolph responded, I was sure you did. Anyway, you and I share a kinship in our great interest in human and social justice. That's right, Mr. President. And so when the president continued talking about cracking jokes and prolonging the conversation, Randolph kept telling him the main reason as to why he was there and why it was important that we focus on the real issues. Now, what I learned from this talk, now would be a compliment. I don't want to, to drag on the what I learned from the mindset that he had, that from when he was a child, he was brought up to be a leader. He was brought up to speak right. He was brought up to say the right thing. So even when he went to the White House, he gets to that level and everyone thinks he's from Harvard, and he's never stepped in Harvard. But what I learned is the soft skills. The soft skills. Many times we look out for the academics. We look out for all these other things. When you look at our CVs, they see so many things. And yet in our careers, if we are to grow, we need to learn how to nurture in this, I think it's page 139, it talks, the story of Moses was very important to the early movement of the Black Americans, because Moses when during the burning bush, he was not qualified. He was a murderer, and God was telling him, go back to Egypt and free my people. He used to stammer, he could not talk, but God was able to use him. And the Black Americans love that story, because even with his challenges and shortcomings and his stuttering speech, he was able to stand before Pharaoh and lead the entire nation of Israel out of Egypt. And so that was used a lot in the early days to encourage people that even without qualifications, you can be able to do great things. Yeah. And I think this is something that we need to be able to input in our children, to look at those hidden talents. If you see the aspects of leadership, you'll be able to nurture and mentor them through. And also in our career, I remember last week I was giving someone an assignment, and they've been in administrative level for a long time, for over 10 years in administration at the front desk. And when you're given a new assignment, you're like, I don't want new assignments. But this assignment is to help you grow, because I know she's very, very organized. Instead of wasting that talent, just organizing payments and vouchers, I believe she can actually do much more for the company and grow her skill. So many companies right now are looking for much more than a CV. They're looking for what those soft skills, yeah. And so that is what I took away from this chapter. Back to you, Primera.
All right, thank you so much, Claire. Over to you, Kathy. Do we have any comments on the chat?
The story of Phil meeting the president reminded me of a sermon by a bishop who visited church, and he talked about a reunion he was invited to by the Old Budonians club, and it was, the non-Primeras lot who are more accommodating, but the hardcore lot, the ones that studied with the Kabakas and all. So while he was sitting at the front, so one of the gentlemen was the organizer turned to him and asked, sir, I wonder which cohort you're in, because I don't seem to recall which year you were in King's College Budo. So the bishop turns and says, no, sir, I was never in Budo. I'm here to just be a minister of God in your presence. So it's just one of those things just reminded me of how you can actually be an underdog, but stand before kings and you actually deliver what you're supposed to deliver. And that's what Phil did. He was never at Harvard, but just the principle of I have to do what I'm meant to do. Just, got over his fears, and probably he also had imposter syndrome, but because he was on a mission, he had to deliver. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Claire, are you ready to move to chapter 7?
Okay. There are other, I think, because of time, there are other examples, like the example of Rustine. I just want to encourage everyone to go back and read the story of Rustine. We may not go through it, but it's a very interesting story of someone who was raised by his grandparents, and the person he thought was his sister all his life found out that that was a mother. Father was an alcoholic, but later through his story you can see how he changes and grows. So I encourage you and read the different stories that we have known. Actually, this review has not done justice to the book, because there are stories that are really, really deep. So chapter 7 is a story of the slave. It begins with a quote by George Eliot. It says, "A human life, I think, should be well rooted in some spot of native land, where it may get the love of tender kinship for the face of the earth. For the labors of men go forth too, for the sounds of and accents that haunt it. For whatever will give the early home a familiar, unmistakable difference amidst the future widening of knowledge." So this
Hello, Claire. Hi, Claire. All right, we can continue with this chapter, chapter 7, as we wait for her to join back in. So for me, chapter 7 is another story about George Eliot, or she was born as Mary Ann Evans. So this time in England. So her parents, she has a mom, she has a dad, she has brothers, and then the mom passes away, and then her school ends. She stays home, and in her teenage years, she really wanted to associate with her dad, her brothers, but that didn't happen. They were like, she really, really, really wanted them to be part of her life, but that doesn't happen. So she goes on to make quite a few mistakes in her own life as a young woman because of feeling needy in terms of love, in terms of like looking for relationships in places where she shouldn't have been to. And at the end, you find that the book shows her as a lady who was very loving from a very tender age. So she'd be very loving, she's very brilliant in her ideas, in her way through life. Like in terms of the many things she'd do. So finally, she finds someone and she gets married too. And at the end of her life, you find her turning out to be extremely productive. Welcome back, Claire. Claire, welcome back.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So I don't know, had you continued?
Yeah, I was trying to give Mary Ann's story, but you can continue.
Okay, anyway, just a summary about this story. It talks about how the neediness of or the desire to be loved is something that people, if you look at the story of Eliot, she grew up with that, following her brother, a younger brother, following him from school, playing after school, and as he grew, she remained with that that gap and that desire to be loved, and this greatly defined her, like her future as she continued. And And so just as a summary from her story, it's page 153. It says in her famous reference of Middlemarch, Eliot writes about a crisis of a vocation that many young women feel. They experience a great yearning inside, she wrote, a spiritual ardor to devote their energies to some substantial, heroic, and meaningful direction. They are propelled by moral imagination, the urge to do something epic and righteous with their life. These young women freed from within. And so when you read both stories of Marianne and her stories, they go on to show something that was defined as a holy war, and it propelled them to do great things, to live for other people, to live in service of other people, mainly because of their faith. And it also goes to show that even with the heartbreaks, when you look at many people who have done great things, they have stories of pain. One, for example, if you look at maybe Joyce Meyer and her story, maybe without her story, she would not be as big as she is in terms of evangelism. When you look at maybe Oprah Winfrey, and the many stories of women who have had a lot of influence, they have stories of pain, stories of heartbreak, stories of molestation, really things that are unthinkable. But out of that pain, out of that bitterness, they're able to get a vocation, a life service. And so what do I learn from stories like this? We don't have to stay in that pit of heartbreak. We don't have to stay with unforgiveness. There's a part that we skipped that talks about forgiveness and how it can define your character. And so when you look at the stories, these two stories, we find that there's forgiveness, there is evolving, there is not letting the things that we go through define us. And so from this chapter on love, chapter 7, it talks about it has a number of quotes of friendship. It talks about loyalty. And so I just encourage you to read through it and get some key takeaways. Yeah. Thank you, Primera.
All right. Thank you so much, Claire. Thank you for that. Over to you, Kathy. Do you have any comments in the chat or anyone who has any comments that they would like to give us?
Okay, anyone in the audience who would love to comment? I think as much as George Eliot's story is complex, it also shows in the way she wrote, I think love just transforms us into our best selves. For some, yeah, as much as it was very complicated, she had, a man had been married, I think for so many years, so she had to be kind of undercover, could not use his name and all, but she wrote so passionately. I think some of the letters became books, and so it has that element of, how love can absolutely transform us into our best selves, as much as it was complicated. Yeah. Then there is something I also loved, actually. It's, I think, on humility. I just forgot to share it. I love one of the things that someone can remember from this book, if you forget everything else, is Alice had to shrink into a small size to enter Wonderland. And what is he trying to say is, that being humble, being humble will take us into places. It will open doors for us. It just takes us into a different level. Just being humble, shrinking, just like Alice did in order to enter Wonderland. That's one of the things that I will not forget from the road to character. Okay. Anyone else?
My best part about that chapter is on page 185. There's a paragraph at the top which says Mary Ann Evans took a long road to become George Eliot. She had to grow out of her self-centeredness into generous sympathy, but it was at a satisfying maturation. She never overcame her fits of depression and her anxieties about the quality of her own writing, but she could think and feel her way into other people's minds and hearts to exercise what she called the responsibility of tolerance. From disgrace, she rose by the end of her life to be celebrated as a large angel. So the crucial event in that long journey was her love for George Lewis, which stabilized, lifted, and deepened her. They also give some of tributes she gives to her husband, a list of 6 of them, and you can actually see how much she loved him, how much her life had changed. So basically it is going to be a journey and a long road, to move from level of self-centeredness to that level of maturity where it's no longer about us and it's all about the people we serve and the people that are around us. Thank you so much. Any other comments around chapter 7? Thank you so much. Chapter 8 is just about love, ordered love. It takes me to the year 354. It's a really interesting story about a family that wasn't really godly at all, and they're raising a son in the mix of the mother being ungodly and doing ungodly things, and the father being ungodly, wanting to impart things that his own ambition on his own son, which is not right. And the mother who wanted to have dominion over his son, and him getting married, moving away, and at the end of the day, something amazing happened. So I'll wait for Claire to tell us how that story ends.
Thanks, Prim. Maybe I would suggest we just do a summary of the rest of the chapter. Because they really have experiences to thrive. And so for me, I just want to share my key takeaways. I'm struggling with my battery, but I just want to share my key takeaways from this book. One of the things that I have learned from this book is the past needs to help us grow. It needs to help. We need to focus on the future and not to dwell on the past. And the past, as we have seen, can be your circumstances. It may not be your own mistakes, but the circumstances that somehow lead you to where you are right now. And many times you find that it's unforgiveness, which really keeps us stuck in one place. And so I That's one of the key takeaways. And so from this book, I pray that everyone who has been part of this call will be able to self-examine. There was a section of self-examine. We can have all these book reviews, but if we don't reflect on our own lives, we will not grow. And so reflect on the stories of the different men and women that were written in this book, and see how you can apply it to your own life, and see how you can help you look at your Adam 2 and let Adam 1 bow down to Adam 2. Thank you, Primera.
Thank you so much, Claire. We're trying to keep time today. Thank you for helping me summarize that. So chapter 9 is about self-examination and chapter 10 is about big me. So basically what we've been talking about, being able to, for me, my biggest lesson is for me to be able to self-examine, find my flaws, and create an actual plan, yeah, to be able to help me intentionally be able to build Adam 1 and Adam 2. They need to somehow be in balance, but Adam 1 should actually be able to bow down to Adam 2. Then being able to see my flaws, being able to throw away my pride, and being able to find the actual moral values that I need to actually create happiness. So there's a part where, and I'm just going to go to the beginning, where it's about being able to find Adam 2 actually knows the things that it needs to be able to find true happiness. And when we don't have true happiness in our lives, Adam 2 actually nudges us on, yeah? But sometimes we want Adam 1 to win. So we end up relying on Adam 1 more than Adam 2. So it's about really self-awareness, being able to understand. We have tried to send you a little excerpt from the book for you to actually see them. Being able to really write what does Adam 1 mean, what does Adam 2 mean, and being able to be self-aware in terms of what I should do. That has been important for me, and I hope it's going to be important for you. This month, we've already chosen the book to read. I hope you have seen it. I'm going to send it again in the groups. The book we're reading this month. We're going to have a book review on the first Friday of June, but it is public holiday, I believe it's 3rd June. So being a public holiday, we're going to send it to 10th, which is going to be the next Friday in the afternoon to have this session. I'm going to send it. It's a nice book and it's much simpler in terms of reading than this one we've read today, this month. So we try to balance the books and be able to make sure that the reading is happy for everyone. So at least, even if you're not able to complete, you're able to read at least a few couple of books a year that appeal to you the most. We are able to have these sessions to be able to provide summaries. If you haven't read the book, to be able to enjoy the book. You're also be able to make a decision. Should I go and deep dive in the book, or should I just find the sections that I actually really, really need? So thank you so much. Any last words from you, Claire and Kathy, as we close?
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Prim. We have 2 comments, one from Naniki. And she says, people who see themselves as the center of their solar system often get enraptured by their own terrible, but also delicious suffering, while people who see themselves as a piece of a larger universe and a longer story rarely do. Thank you, Naniki, for that summary of the book. Flowers from Olivia. Kodra is saying that vulnerability is not losing or winning. It's having the courage to show up when you cannot control the outcome. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Letitia has sent you flowers and is thanking you ladies for the book review. She's asking how she can join it. Letitia, Prim, do you have the link nearby? If you've gone through the sessions of G4G, it's usually easier. At graduation, you get into the book club. But if you haven't, then Prim.
We are able to. I'll send the links back to the groups. Okay. If you're on any group, and you haven't joined. Okay, like after you finish the 6 sessions, you move to a group, a mentors group, or